The public inquiry into the Liberal government's invocation of the Emergencies Act continues, and more documentation revealed through testimony and what we're seeing doesn't quite paint the picture of violence and scariness that Trudeau and his brethren would like you to think. I'm Adrienne Batra. With me are Jamil Jivani and Brian Lilley. Jamil, I'm referring to recent information that was revealed throughout the course of the inquiry from the daily updates that were being received by intelligence agencies and the public safety ministry. Day after day, they showed reports of no incidents, no violence. And on February 11th, very specifically, the daily security report said that there was a pretty stable situation. And in addition to that, we now know that that claim that they were violent and that they had loaded shotguns in the back of those trucks, none of that was true. So now, Jamil, we are continuing to hear more and more testimony, but shouldn't this narrative that has been out there about the violence and all of that, shouldn't some of this testimony now and some of these documents push quell that narrative?
Absolutely. And Adrian, another key part of the narrative was this idea that it was foreign funded, that somehow outside groups were funding it and therefore Canadians should be worried. Of course, we learned through CSIS and other contributions to the inquiry so far that there's no evidence of foreign funding backing the trucker convoy either. So the entire narrative that this was some sort of unpredictable, unstable, violent group of people that the Emergencies Act was required to control, it just seems to be getting absolutely no support. As more information and more data comes in, it just becomes increasingly clear that Prime Minister Trudeau made this decision largely on his own reasoning. One will probably argue, as when he testifies, a lot of it will be because of political reasoning rather than because of any legitimate threat. So I'm very curious to see how they come back from this, because so far it feels like a pretty one-sided inquiry.
And again, Brian, we've discussed this before, and you've been covering the inquiry for the Sons. Justin Trudeau has said, "Oh, there's violence. This can't go on." Sure, for the people, the residents of Ottawa, it was a massive disruption, and there were legitimate issues and concerns. I'm not trying to disqualify those experiences. I'm not. But what I think Canadians need to understand is that broader narrative of this scariness and this violence. It just didn't exist. It just was not there. And very own intelligence agencies and security law enforcement agencies have borne that out.
Well, now we know why when the act was still in place. I mean, the act's in place, but when it was invoked, one of the requirements is that they have to explain to Parliament under Section 58. They have to explain to Parliament why they did this. And now, so they sent in a report, but now we know why they cited CBC instead of CSIS as the source of the foreign funding claim, because intelligence agencies weren't saying that was there, but CBC was, probably at the behest of the government, so they cite CBC. They didn't cite the RCMP, the OPP, the Ottawa Police, or CSIS. So, but why was that important that they say there was foreign funding? Because in order to invoke a public order emergency, which is what they did, you have to show that there is a threat to the security of Canada and that it's a national scale. The protest in Ottawa should have been disbanded after the first week, but that's a local policing issue. You have the right to keep coming back to protest, but you don't have the right to set up your big rig on Wellington Street and occupy a major thoroughfare in any city. That's not a charter right, but that's a local policing issue. The local police weren't handling it. They cooked up false pretenses for invoking the Emergencies Act because the Ottawa police were so incompetent. And we've seen an awful lot of that in the testimony, including infighting, police slowly, or former chief slowly, yelling, screaming at subordinates, saying that he'd crush people who got in his way, but not having a plan. I mean, they thought this was going to be a 1 or 2 day protest. They didn't even look at the intelligence reports. They had no idea that people were coming to do what they did, even though they'd been upfront about it, and we'd all reported on it.
Jamil, I'm going to give you the last word here. The blame game, as Brian sort of has laid out for us, is so obvious. You know, one level of government blaming the other level of government. This agency, this agency. The fact is, they weren't talking to each other. They weren't communicating with one another, and most importantly, they weren't reading the briefings. The intelligence reports were there, but and so they could cast their gaze and their resources to where they felt it was necessary. They did not do that. But one of the things that remains to be the biggest sticking point for, I think, even Canadians who didn't like the protest, didn't support the trucker convoy, still made a very distasteful taste in their mouth, was the seizing of the bank accounts. And that is not something that we've really heard about yet. They haven't really explored that yet. Do you anticipate us hearing a really I'm not expecting a reasonable argument, but some sort of logic behind that element of what happened?
Well, I don't expect the prime minister or anyone sort of on his side on the issue to want to bring it up themselves, because I don't think they have much of a defense to offer. They may be forced to talk about it, I hope, when it comes to when the prime minister testifies. And also, I hope that some of the experts that are coming will talk about that issue, because I do think it's one of the clearest examples. You know, I think it's, you know, we made the point, I think, very clearly that there is some nuance in this whole thing. There is complexity to this. Obviously, what happened in Ottawa over the course of those weeks is going to bring very strong and different opinions from different Canadians, and that's a worthwhile debate to have. I don't think freezing the bank accounts is one where the prime minister is going to get a lot of support. I think he's going to find himself a man on his own when it comes to that one.
And we eagerly anticipate Justin Trudeau's testimony at the inquiry in the coming weeks. Log on to Facebook and Twitter. Let us know what you think, and go to thetorontosun.com and hit that subscribe button. You'll find coverage there that you will not find anywhere else.